Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Chris with InsideTheU. Thanks for stopping by. Number 13, Miami loses 42-41 to number 18, Iowa State in the Pop-Tarts Bowl. Finishes the season 10-3, losing their 3 of their last 4 games. Just a really disappointing end of the season. There's so much I've been thinking about with this game. Been talking to other reporters in the press box just about how everything transpired in today's game. And look, Miami jumped out to a 9-0 start of the season, number 4 in the country, a lot of excitement, Cam Ward, everything that was going on with the offense, and the defense just really struggled throughout, but the offense was able to kind of carry him through, and then the defense just simply fell apart in the end, did not play well once again in this game, and proved to be costly. You know, just a quick shout out to Tim Reynolds of the AP. He told me this stat, and maybe he's already shared it with you guys, but Miami had been 50-0 when scoring at least 38 points in a game and at least 500 yards of total offense. And that record is now 50-2 because they did it against Syracuse in their regular season finale and lost that game. And then they did it again today against Iowa State. And look, defensively, let's start with the defense. Miami's got to get a lot better. You know, I know there's a lot of criticism of defensive coordinator Lance Guidry. And I understand that people want to move on. And look, Coach wasn't asked directly afterwards in the press conference, which I highly recommend watching, and not just because the whole backdrop behind him fell on top of him mid post-game press conference. But, you know, I just kind of urge everyone he did answer some questions there a little bit. You know, just the best that he likes to give answers. There were some things he didn't address, but in regards to the defense, you know, he wasn't asked directly, look, is Lance Guidry going to be your defensive coordinator next season? However, he did say a few things about the defense and basically said if communication issues, just not playing well enough is simply put, that's simply what he said. But he said, you know, and I think this is the thing, is that, you know, just the defense in general just didn't play up to the standard this year that they're expecting. And so whether a move is going to be made, if you were to ask me right now, yes, I would expect it. Mario's already changed his defensive coordinator in the past, and I understand all of the criticism. So I'd be surprised, I guess, at this point, if Lance Guidry does return next year as Miami's defensive coordinator. With that being said, regardless of who the coordinator is, whether it's Lance or somebody else, the players have got to play better. They've got to improve in all 3 areas. I thought the defensive line had to be the strength of this defense throughout the season. Coming into it, I thought the linebacker play was maybe expect to be average, some good games, maybe not so some good games. And then I thought the secondary was really going to struggle, and we certainly did see that. But I thought the defensive line was going to be able to kind of ease some of the pressure on the back end. And just throughout the season, just not able to get enough of a pass rush. And I think we saw that again today against Iowa State. I think a pass rush would have helped. Yes, Rocco Beck was good and delivering the ball. He wanted to get the ball out, and Iowa State was able to rack up over 400 yards of total offense, and Rocco was able to go down the field on that final drive. And this is the thing about the defense, and this is where they need to be better at. In moments. Look, they put together a 15-play, 84-yard drive to win the game that lasted nearly 6 minutes. And scored on a 4th and 1 play. So Miami had chances to get off the field, and they just weren't able to do that. And that's kind of my takeaway throughout the season. Look, if you give up yards in the middle of the field, this isn't a great defense, obviously, but they got to be able to buckle down in red zone defense. And those kind of moments, whether it's end of game, which they did at times throughout the year, but it just wasn't enough. And it didn't happen today. You know, they allowed touchdowns on the first 4 drives of the game. Certainly the team didn't look ready. They didn't have a full group of guys in the back end. You know, Daryl Porter didn't play. Damari Brown, you know, was essentially a non-factor all season long, and that was extremely disappointing. Robert Stafford wasn't available. He's already moved to the portal, as well as Robbie Washington. So those were seldom used guys, and they just kind of leaned on their guys. And in the secondary, I thought the linebackers struggled, and it just felt like Iowa State was just doing whatever they wanted. You know, I kind of made a comment that it felt like Iowa State, especially in the first half, they were on the power play. They're just like, guys were open. The defense certainly was frustrated. We saw the fight. I'm a few minutes into this, and I didn't even mention the sideline fight between Simeon Barrow and Marquise Lightfoot. Really disappointing to see. You know, I know some people might think it's okay, but teammates fighting on the sideline, that's certainly a lot of frustration, lack of discipline with this program. That's just the reality. Look, I understand Coach Cristobal wants to talk about discipline and having structure and culture and all of these things, but that was not a sign of those things. That was an undisciplined, reactionary moment. That can't happen. And this team has been one of the most heavily penalized teams in the country all season long and the last 2 years under Cristobal, and that needs to clean up. They got to be much better. Where, Iowa State with Matt Campbell, they led the country in least amount of penalty yards. So that's an area I think that they definitely can improve upon for next year. So look, once again, defense has to get better. They've got to get better players, or the players that return next season have to be better on the field. They've got to improve their play. There's nobody coming back that to me, that is an automatic, just a very good player. I thought Ruben Bain was going to be that this year. I touched on him coming into the game. I touched on him throughout the year. The injury, I get it. But next year, draft year for Ruben Bain, you're expecting him to be one of the best defensive players in the ACC. So we will see how his offseason goes. They need a player like that caliber on this defense, just like what we saw with the offense this year. For all the complaining about the defense, there was not a Cam Ward on the defense. There wasn't a guy putting up big numbers, big sacks. And I know Michel Powell had the 5 interceptions, which is great, but even his play was spotty at times. So all across the field, safeties, corners, linebackers, defensive ends, defensive tackles, they've just got to get better players, and then just kind of whoever the coordinator is, make sure it fits their defense, and then week in and week out, it becomes a strength of the team, as opposed to a weakness like it was this year, because you saw how costly it ultimately became, especially in these last few games. The offense wasn't great against Georgia Tech, obviously, but neither was the defense against a team that wasn't even passing the ball. In the Syracuse game, giving up as many points and weren't able to slow them down. And then against Iowa State, they did have their moments. I do want to give them credit. But again, when you give up 21 points in the first quarter, you're not going to give up that each and every quarter. And I just thought the defense didn't do nearly enough to make an impact in this game, and didn't really give the team a chance to win. Not nearly enough is what they needed to do. Now offensively, with Cam Ward in particular, let's start there. He was great in the first half. Got to see him, 190 yards, 3 touchdown passes. Looked good. He kept the team, he really kept matching what Iowa State was doing. And Miami actually took a 31-20 lead into halftime. He broke the record. I'm sure you heard about it. Most touchdown passes. That was great to see. But then he didn't play in the second half. And I felt like a lot of people had interesting takes about it. If he was only going to play a half or a quarter, and which is what I expected, and I didn't know exactly how long it was going to be, but I expected him to be out of the game regardless of the score, based on the things I was hearing. And that's what happened. And I think there's a big controversy, or you could go different ways with it. Should he have been allowed to play only one half? Should Emory Williams have been given the whole game if Cam was only going to play a half? Whose decision was all this? Or do you just put Cam in there, you're going to play him as much as you can, and just kind of move on, to Emory in the second half like they did? You could see it different ways. And also I thought was interesting, on the TV broadcast, I'm sure you saw, Cam Ward warming up at the end of the game. I was actually talking to a reporter with Daryl Streeter over at Footballville. He said he was down on the field, and he actually saw Cam was warming up with Emory Williams during that time, and just kind of warming him up, and he didn't think Cam was possibly going back in the game. So I just want to pass that along, because on the TV broadcast, we only saw Cam warming up. So, but maybe you thought, when you saw that, put Cam back in there for the final drive. Maybe Miami can win this bowl game. And I thought they needed to win this bowl game. With how the season ended against Syracuse, and the loss to Georgia Tech, not even getting into the ACC championship game. So when Emory got in there, they certainly ran the ball there in the second half, and I was worried. I'm always concerned about not necessarily the results, but the process of how they were making plays. And because it was close, they weren't really having Emory throw the ball. They were fine with them giving the ball and handing it off. And shout out to Damian Martinez, a huge game, over 170 yards, had that 75-yard touchdown run, which I thought was much needed the way the game started. But at some point, and certainly we saw it, at some point Emory was going to have to throw the ball downfield. And certainly he struggled doing that on the final drive. They didn't even cross midfield, didn't even give Borregales a shot to get off a field goal. Really disappointing performance by Emory Williams. He had his opportunity. Look, similar to Jakari Brown last year. Doesn't play much all year. Jakari didn't play at all. And then Emory didn't play much this year. And then he had his opportunity in the second half. And I thought he really squandered an opportunity to go out there, make a statement, and show people, show everybody within the program, the coaches, the fan base, that you are deserving of being Miami's starting quarterback in 2025. But Emory goes and throws for 26 yards on 5 of 14 passing, and throws the interception on the final play of the game. It's right next to me, actually, that was where the interception was. It didn't even get to the end zone. So overall, really disappointed for Emery, you know, and I have a lot of questions. I had a lot of questions going into this game about Emery and his future at Miami. Now, we will see how things transpire in the transfer portal, in the offseason. You know, I do understand it was an unfair position for Emery to go in when he hadn't been playing, jump in at halftime, and play well. But you needed him to do that, and I thought he really struggled. I didn't see enough from him last year when he played in those games against Clemson and Florida State for me to think that he was going to be the future for the Hurricanes. And when I talk about the future, you're talking about, can he be a quarterback to lead this team to an ACC title? And I have not seen that yet. We will see how everything goes. Like I said, with the transfer portal, if they're going to bring someone else in, maybe they didn't like what they saw today, or maybe Shannon Dawson, like he has been saying since Emery arrived, is still really impressed with Emery, because he has always said that. He's always been very impressed with what Emery's done in practices and scrimmages. We've seen some stuff from the spring game, so Emery has looked good, and I know the staff has been confident in him. But we'll see how things go. At this moment in time, I'm not very confident in him. You know, certainly talking about this game, it was only a 1-point loss, and I know I'm harping on a lot of the negatives with this game. One of the few positives that I did see, that I was encouraged by, it was one of the players that I was excited to see in this game, and that was JoJo Trader. 3 catches, 61 yards, had a 40-yard touchdown catch, which was great to see first as a Hurricane. You know, when you see him, I think people can see why a lot of people, including myself, have been very high on him and believe he has a bright future. I wasn't able to ask Coach Cristobal that question. The press conference ended quickly and kind of abruptly. Like I said, the whole thing fell down on him. They asked a couple more questions and that was it. So I wasn't able to ask. But JoJo, I thought, showed signs in this game that was encouraging. I liked what I saw in him. And again, that 40-yard touchdown was impressive, and that's what I expect him to be able to do. A big play guy, score touchdowns. He also has some nice catches, you know, in traffic too. So I'm encouraged by what I saw with JoJo. I think he's got a bright future. I think he's in line, he should be in line to be a starting wide receiver for Miami, a big playmaker next year. I think he can do that in year 2. But we will see how things go. Once again, I think it's very interesting to watch how the transfer portal plays out. You know, last year they brought in Sam Brown when I thought Isaiah Horton was going to have that job. They bring in Sam Brown, and now Horton's kind of, you know, in a different spot. Brown was expected to be the starter. Horton did a great job of performing this year, but he decided to move on. And maybe that decision back then played a factor in his decision on leaving. JoJo Trader was another guy. Didn't play much all year long because of the addition of Sam Brown, but now we will see how things go to see what receivers they bring into the program, because a lot of these guys are moving on. With Xavier Restrepo, obviously didn't play in this game, he's moving on, Jacoby George, so we will see how things kind of go moving forward for the wide receiver group. I'm very interested in seeing it. Certainly the quarterback, that's the biggest thing in the portal, but wide receiver as well, based on what they have on the roster and then who they're going to bring in addition to what they've already brought in. So I feel like when I do these, I definitely want to try to keep these tight. I don't want to ramble on too long, and here I am. I'm doing that. There's just a lot going on in my thoughts and in my head with how this game transpired. And really, it's the totality of the season. I'll have plenty of more content and videos in the off season, talk about some of this stuff and moving forward. But it just ended, and just thinking back on the season, again, finished 10-3. It's a good step forward from where they were last year and when Mario had his first season here. But it definitely feels like there's a sour taste on how it all ended. Again, 9-0. And it wasn't like there was an injury to Cam Ward or a major player on this team that affected the team down the stretch. They just simply lost games. It wasn't a tiebreaker. It wasn't the CFP leaving them out. They didn't do enough to earn the position there down the stretch, and now losing 3 or 4. Feels like a little bit about 2017, starting 10-0, which was great. It was a lot of fun that season watching that team play, but they lost their last 3 games. So we'll see how this team kind of bounces back in the offseason. Who's going to stick around? We have to always ask that question now. And how do the pieces all fit? And what kind of team is it going to look like? You're not going to have a Cam Ward next year, most likely. He's one of one. But so what does that mean? If the quarterback play is a little bit down, does the running game enhance a little bit? But regardless of how the offense looks, even if they come down a little bit, the defense has to get much better. That has to be the point of emphasis for this team. You look at all the good teams around college football over the years, always have a good defense. And you saw that in the ACC. Clemson and SMU, the 2 teams that ended up in the ACC championship game, both finished top 3 in scoring defense, top 3 in scoring offense and conference play. That's what Miami needs to aspire to do to get to the ACC title game next year. again, we'll see how everything goes. I want to thank everybody for your support, not just today, not just for the bowl game stuff, but all season long. This is a great opportunity to kind of thank everybody as the season comes to an end. As the year comes to an end, I do have some more things coming up here. I'm going to the Under Armour practices, Under Armour game. Definitely going to stick around for that. There's some Miami guys there. So I'll be back just real shortly. But just kind of anyone that's interested in the team and watching these videos, I always appreciate you guys. It brings me joy that I can actually be able to talk about these things and kind of get some thoughts off of my chest and out of my head and see what you guys have to say as well. Drop in the comments. I didn't mention that, but I always like to see what you have to say about this team. So drop in the comments what I get right, or maybe what do you agree with, what do you disagree with, what were some things I missed, what were some things that you saw in this game that I didn't talk about that you thought was a big factor. But ultimately, disappointed in, there's no doubt about it. It was just really frustrating. Would have liked to have seen this team finish on a positive note, and I think that we saw that with the last time they won a bowl game in 2016. It really elevated that 2017 team, really positive momentum. So unfortunately it didn't happen, but I want to thank again for your support. Have a good rest of the weekend, have a good rest of 2024, and take care.